There are a lot of advisors out there that are losing so slowly, they still think they're winning.
A lot of folks in the space are underestimating the complexity behind growth.
There's a lot of unknowns about what you could actually get for or what you could actually plan for in your succession planning.
It is not just one and done. There's a structure to this that maybe checks some boxes that has prevented you from thinking about even having this conversation.
Welcome to the Total Succession Show. I'm your host, Tyson Ray, joined by Kim Cochenour. We're glad you're here. Subscribe at totalsuccession.com/podcast and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. Today's conversation just might be the nudge you need to start preparing for what's next.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Total Succession podcast. If you've been listening for a while, you know we're here to help financial advisors think clearly and act confidently when it comes to your exit. And today's episode hits right at the heart of our mission. One of the biggest shifts happening in our space right now is the convergence of advisor retirements, the increased M&A activity, and the surge of private equity interests in our industry. Dean Smith is here with us today. He's the Director of Business Development at Wealth Enhancement Group, a firm that's been on the forefront of this shift.
Yeah, we're happy to have him on. We actually had conversations almost 2 years ago now. It's just time just flies. And got to know Wealth Enhancement Group, got to know Dean, and we're excited to bring Dean on to help represent Wealth Enhancement Group, to help you who's listening to this decide, is this a fit for you as you're exploring succession?
Yeah. So for those of you who are wondering if a firm like Wealth Enhancement Group could be a part of your transition path, you're definitely going to hear what Dean has to say about deal structure, what actually would make this a great fit for you, and the emotional curve that most advisors actually hit after the ink is dry. So Dean, thanks for being here. Why don't you give us a quick intro about who you are, your background in this space, and your why behind it all?
Well, Kim, Tyson, it's great to see you. Thank you both for having me on. Really enjoyed our conversations with you both, professionally and personally a few years ago. And
Yeah.
the second you made the invite to be on, it was an instant yes. And then listening to the last episodes, it seems like a relatively new podcast, since, in the last couple months. And it's awesome what you're doing in the space. I really enjoyed the 3 or 4 episodes I've listened to. So thank you very
Oh,
much
thank you.
for having me on. Looking forward to the conversation. And at WEG, we always promise to be transparent. So I'm looking forward to just laying it all out for you and the listeners and having an organic conversation. I'm a director of M&A here at WEG. I've been at WEG since early 2021. Since then, we've completed about 70 partnership transactions. What drives me, Kim, is I'm very passionate about what we're building. I think that our industry, and you guys see this day in and day out, on the front lines, is that our industry is changing rapidly. The promise and the desire to provide the best advice to clients and improve people's lives, that's not changing, but the way that you go about doing that is changing. And, I know you guys are Wisconsin folks. We're based here in Minneapolis. We're a very Midwestern firm. We don't think we have the world figured out. So I'm not going to say that, we are building the winning platform, but what gets me excited is I believe that we are building something that's very competitive, not only to best serve clients, from the late 90s when we were, just in our infancy, to 2025 to 2050. We want to build something that is competitive in the landscape of providing the best advice to clients. So I know we'll talk and touch on that a little bit later, but that's ultimately what gets me really excited to come to work every day.
Yeah, well, we can hear the passion in your voice. And for you who are listening, I'm excited for you to kind of hear a little bit more from Dean throughout. So, Dean, I think it's going to be helpful if you can kind of give a little bit of perspective on industry trends. Sitting in the seat that you are, being at the firm as long as you have been, you've got a great vantage point on the macro trends. So, what are you seeing across the industry right now in terms of advisor retirement and consolidation?
So we believe that the kind of influx in M&A to our space that really started in about 2015 is driven by 2 things. The first is that desire for succession planning, kind of the financial component of it, right? You guys know the stats, approximately 40% of the industry assets are going to be transitioning hands or retiring in the next 10 years. It's well over $10 trillion in assets. With multiples where they are, with how big some of these practices have become, the internal succession is challenging. I think you guys
Mhm.
talk about that on a
Yeah.
lot, so I won't beat the dead horse there. So we believe that, as you try to facilitate a financial transaction that works for everybody, that becomes challenging, which has helped drive the consolidation and M&A. The other main factor, kind of what gets us really excited about WEG and what we're building, is we think that scale matters. If you looked back, 20 years ago, it was a very different environment. That promise of delivering the best advice to clients looks a lot different than it does today, right? We have a very evolving regulatory environment, especially on the cybersecurity side and compliance side. The digital transformation as more clients find their advisor online, the shift in talent landscape with kind of the new training and how you develop an advisor and how AI comes into that, the evolution of the investor and just people wanting more sophistication. We think that scale matters, but also entrepreneurial spirit matters, and you guys know that. So how do you harness both of those? So we think between the financial side of the succession planning and the scale and that mattering, that being introduced kind of in the last 10 years with the bigger firms growing faster and having more to offer, we think that that's really driving a lot of this M&A activity.
Part of the reason we're doing this podcast is that there's just a lot of lack of information that's out there for people to even start knowing what these options look like and what they're choosing or not choosing to compete against going forward.
Right. We completely agree.
The flywheel is turning with the number of advisors who are retiring, looking for that succession, and some of them are getting near the very end of their career. Do you see burnout in advisors and just kind of the complexity of compliance and the industry changes actually being a driver in some of these exits?
100%. When people, I'm speaking with advisors all day, every day, and people, and generally when I'm speaking with advisors, they love their clients, they love their team, they love what they do, they get their self-esteem from helping people, but they do not enjoy the complexity of compliance and HR and billing and cybersecurity. They are very burned out by that. I remember the first partnership we did in 2013, speaking with Kevin, he said, I was working 6 days a week and 3 of it was with my clients and the team and 3 of it was on the business. When I partnered up with WEG, I was able to reduce that to a normal 5 days a week, and I could spend, 5 days a week with my clients and teams. So I absolutely see the burnout influencing these exits.
And so, with that in mind, how is the nature of some of these deals shifting? Are more advisors, when they're kind of losing some of that fatigue from working on the business, are they staying involved post succession planning? Are you seeing that shift?
Yes. And when folks partner up with WEG, we see a lot of advisors who feel like they want to stay on for kind of call it 3 to 5 years post deal. And then you fast forward, and we can talk about the reasoning behind that, but you fast forward 3 or 4 years post deal, and they say, I'm having fun again. I might want to retire on a portion of my book, facilitate a transition to my second generation, but I still want to come into the office a few days a week. I still want to mentor the G2. I still want, to service my clients, many of whom which become close personal friends. And so we see kind of the the energy come back to a lot of advisors who partner up with us.
So is one of the mistakes then, if you're listening to this, that you may be having is that you're thinking of succession as you're done, and you don't know if you want to be done, but you know what you want to stop doing. Is that
I would
where
definitely I would definitely agree. We have 2 full-time employees at WEG that work on advisor succession planning and transitions. And as simple as this sounds, no 2 advisor transitions and books of business are the same. But what we do know is that when they are well planned and well thought out, and there's a game plan, they are much smoother for the most importantly the clients, and then afterward, the team and ultimately the firm.
Yeah. If you're listening right now and you're trying to figure out what this means for your own planning, let's kind of talk about that. Are you seeing, Dean, are you seeing advisors rethink their exit strategies now that aggregators are there, the integrators are there, and there's PE backed firms being so active in the space?
I think so. I think, where valuations are, historically, from a financial perspective, and just the services that many of these large kind of mega RIAs have to offer. I think that folks are really looking at this because they're realizing, wow, my business from a financial perspective is worth more than I ever thought it would be. But also, I could partner up with a larger organization, not just a WEG, but any one of the large organizations. I can take some chips off the table financially. I can address the buyout of retiring partner or partners. And I can better serve my clients and set my team up for success, because as the environment changes, the way that we find clients changes, what clients are looking for and demanding changes. We can set our next generation up for success with one of these larger organizations.
If you're listening to this and you're a broker dealer, you're an inside a broker dealer. How is that different, or are there more or less of those versus the hybrid maybe that's out there, or that I really think it's kind of bifurcated, right? You're either an employee or tied in, that you don't own the practice, that the practice is tied into your rep code, different from the full IRAs. Are there more RAs they're looking to roll up, or is it more broker dealers, or is it more of the hybrid? And how are those? How could you speak to the difference for the people listening that are in those three camps effectively?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. My guess is that it's more pure RIAs and hybrid RIAs that have a broker dealer affiliation that are a part of these transactions. I mean, if you look back, there were 89 RIA M&A deals in 2015, and in 2024 there were 233. So pretty rapid increase.
Wow.
I don't have the numbers in terms of, lift outs of wirehouses, broker dealer teams transitioning. My guess is that those numbers have also increased. But my guess is there are still more kind of pure RIA and hybrid RIAs that truly, own the entire business, that are making this transition. We look at it in terms of, and I most most advisors, whether they legally own their book or don't, they have great relationships with their clients. And I don't love the term, own your book, but from a legal perspective, do you have a non-solicit, non-compete, restrictive covenants that if you were to get up and exit your position within the firm, can you solicit and bring those clients either before you close a transaction or after for a certain period? And so we look at it in a couple different swim lanes in terms of, are you able to transition your clients prior to closing a transaction with a partner? Do you close a transaction and then bring the clients over, or do you close a transaction, wait a period of time, and then begin bringing clients?
So, when advisors are thinking about their exit strategies, are they under or overestimating the valuation of their practice or underestimating the complexity of what this is going to take? How educated are most advisors coming into this transition?
I think it depends on whether an advisor chooses to have representation in this process.
Mm.
There are a lot of folks who are representing advisors through this transition that want professional help, whether it be a recruiter or an investment banker or somewhat of a middle person to connect folks with others, other partners. I think that many are underestimating, the value of their business and the complexity. I also think that a lot of folks in the space are underestimating kind of the complexity behind growth and true growth. You look at kind of the last 12 years, we've had this incredible market run. And so if you're an advisor doing $1 million a year in revenue, and then you fast forward a year and you're doing $1.1 million, you're thinking, I'm growing. And the question is are you growing net of market? That's what a lot of these large RIAs and truly the private equity firms are looking at is they call it net flows, right? Are you growing from a new assets in versus assets out basis without market? And I think a lot of folks kind of overestimate their growth because we've had this great market performance. And so if you look at these net flows, they tend to be lower and often negative for older firms because you have clients who are in their withdrawal phase and they're bringing 4 to 5% out. And then you have 1 to 2% of attrition in terms of an unhappy client or a death or a divorce, whatever it may be. And so you look at firms, and if you're 100 million in AUM, you've got 6 or 7 million going out the door. But all of a sudden, if you're $1 billion, you got $70 million going out the door every single year. You've got to find a way to replace that without market. And I think a lot of folks get lost in terms of organic growth. Is organic growth truly new business? Is it existing clients putting assets in, or is it just market?
The reality is there are a lot of advisors out there that are losing so slowly they still think they're winning because market growth masks the reality of what your practice is really worth or what the practice is going to be worth into the future or what that opportunity is.
So let's kind of talk through kind of the idea of the fork in the road. Like, okay, how do you kind of make some of those decisions if you're going to join a firm like WEG, or if you're going to kind of do what we did and kind of go out on your own? So, Dean, I'd like you to talk through what makes someone a strong fit to work and partner with WEG, and what's typically not a fit.
That's a great question. I will start with what is a fit. For us, it's quite simple. We joke, the game 20 questions, where you find your niece or nephew, and you can really, between 15 and 20 questions, get it right. Well, Tyson and Ken, you guys are both really smart, so maybe it would take 30 questions. For us, when we're looking for really good fits, it's really three questions. It's, are they client centric, right? Do they care about clients? Do they want to see great outcomes for clients? Would you send your parents or a loved one or a sibling to get financial advice from them? That's where it starts, right? And if the answer is no, and unfortunately it's no more than we'd like to admit, it's just not a fit, right? There are 22,000 RIAs out there. There are so many breakaways from the wirehouses and broker dealer world. We don't have, that's not our culture. And we're not going to break that, just because we can do another deal and get more AUM. So it starts with, are they client centric? Do they care about their clients, seeing them achieve great outcomes? The next is, do they believe in planning? And we'll talk a little bit more, I assume, about our model here at WEG in terms of integrator, aggregator. But ultimately, planning in our world can look and feel different. But do they believe in the art of planning and holistic planning? Do they want to be bringing in specialists from other areas, tax and trust and estate planning, to really better serve the client? We think, if you look at the asset management space, there's been all this fee compression. We're not seeing that in the true wealth management space, right? The people who are doing planning, if anything, they're actually seeing fee expansion, because they're providing so much value. And we see clients want everything under one roof. So are they planning? Are they planning centric? And then last, are they growth oriented? Do they want to grow? Our mission, we want to help more people. So do they want, to have this be a part of their succession planning and take a check and walk away? Or do they want this to be the next chapter for growth, right? They're in that sixth inning of their career. They realize that they love what they do, but they're bogged down running the business, and they ultimately want to run the practice and help people. That's kind of our ideal target, right? They love their clients, they believe in planning, they want to grow, and they want to help people. That's a really good fit for a WEG team. Going a little bit deeper, right? Do they have a team around them? Is it a one-man band, or do they have a kind of an infrastructure and team around them to help provide this? We're not a me culture. We're a we culture. We believe in the power of team. We don't think any one person can provide holistic and comprehensive financial advice, right? You can't be a specialist in estate planning and an investment guru and a tax savant and be a great business developer and run a great practice. It's not possible. So you got to bring in specialists. And so we want to see people who really embrace that team. So ideally, you have a really good team around you as well. In terms of not a great fit, we do have a lot of autonomy on the investment side, but if you're purely an investment manager and you do no planning, and more importantly, you have no interest in increasing your planning capabilities, we're not really a good fit. If you're somebody who thinks you have the world completely figured out, we're not a great fit. You should probably look to more of a financial investor just to take some liquidity. We want people who want to come in and collaborate with others and be part of a bigger organization and have that groupthink mentality, to better serve clients. We're, like I said, we're a we culture, not a me culture. So if you're really investment centric, you really think that you've got the best practice in the world and you're just looking for some liquidity, we're not a great fit. And then lastly, if you don't see yourself sticking around to help mentor the next gen, I mean, we got into M&A which, you listen to our chief strategy officer talk. M&A is a really challenging way to grow a business. I know you guys have experience with it from the integration, from the expenses, from the legal side. It's really challenging. We're doing M&A for talent, right? We were trying to grow at the time in Chicago, and we were flying advisors down there, and that wasn't working super well. We were finding clients, but it wasn't the best system, and so we tried hiring advisors, and that didn't work as well. And so we started doing M&A for talent, and so we're looking for people who not only want to do this as part of their succession planning, but also want to mentor the next gen and grow and build the business. So if you're not in those three things, it's not really a good fit.
And so the opposite of that is the fit. It's the person that basically wants to let go of the administrivia or wants in the RIA space a little more flexibility than maybe they had in the broker dealer space of the tools and the resources that are out there that are maybe lacking in that broker dealer or aren't as robust or aren't as up to the times, if you will. That they would like to basically have their retirement be the sitting down with their friends and family and people that they love and kind of maybe finish the job the way a lot of us started with just taking care of the clients. And so WAG would be one of those resources that could be worthy of exploration to find out, can they take away some of the headaches to allow you to finish well with more energy and joy in this career you have than burnout and exiting because you just can't stand it anymore. And yet you have all these people that want your help and that trust you.
So, one of the things I think, if you're listening to this, you're kind of thinking about deal structure itself. There's a lot of unknowns about what you could actually get for or what you could actually plan for in your succession planning. So, walk us through, Dean, the structure types you typically use. Are you talking about upfront cash, earnout, equity? And what do those actually look like in actuality or in practice?
Absolutely. So there were 78 different acquirers in 2024. And so I'll speak just for what I know on the industry, but there is basically anything out there under the sun for you. If you are interested in a minority investment, to retain command and take some chips off the table and potentially have that be the first step before a larger deal, that's an option out there. And I've, as someone that does full acquisitions, I've got my opinions on that, but that's an option. If there's a sell and fully walk away day one, that with just cash, all at close, you're likely going to have a lower price, but there's probably a buyer out there for you. The majority of firms that are truly doing kind of repeatable, accretive M&A are doing full acquisitions in terms of, it's 100% asset purchase that are some combination of cash and equity at close, retention payments for retaining the revenue a year or 2 or 3 years down the line, and then an earnout payment, which is a growth payment. So it's a growth kicker, and that's typically the last payment. These are made kind of anywhere from, call it, 2 to 5 years in length from what we're hearing in the space, with the majority at close, and then most firms having somewhat of a minimum lever of equity that they'd like you to take in the business, as well as ideally an offering for your junior employees to be able to purchase equity if they're not an equity owner in the business today.
Well, and I think part of the consideration is helpful when you have a smaller team doesn't mean that you have to figure out all the succession planning, but as part of this transition to WEG, sounds like you build that in to help them find a way to retain those key employees beyond the retiring advisor's plan.
Absolutely. So on top of our junior advisors being offered the opportunity, assuming they hit the qualifications to purchase equity after the transaction, we actually have a successor program that we've had at WEG where we've transitioned over $20 billion from retiring advisors to junior advisors. It essentially is the paying out of the future cash flows of the business. It's a slightly more complicated than that, but it's the ability for a retiring advisor to hand kind of the compensation of the business over to the junior advisor. The junior advisor, or the successor advisor rather, takes over and has full autonomy and authority over the team and how they work with clients, but they split the cash flow with the retired advisor for a period of years. And so it's been a really good way for senior advisors to say, hey, there's still motivation for me to grow and there's motivation for me to get a really good successor and facilitate a really smooth transition because we're a revenue share model. And if that revenue share goes down, then my successor program decreases. And it's also been a really good way to get successor advisors excited about taking over a book of business. They don't have to go out and go up to their neck in debt. And they see that pathway, to leadership. They see the pathway to being kind of the lead advisor, and that's been very attractive and just aligns incentives.
So if you're hearing this for the first time, as I was a year or two ago, and trying to digest all this, it's like prior maybe to hearing this or tuning into these podcasts, you just thought the sale was a certain multiple of revenues and a check, and whether that was an installment sale but it was basically you were done, you were out, you turned it over, and now it's cash. You understand cash in terms of cash, but then there's this equity piece, and what that is one, there's some tax planning to that because a lot of times it's rollover equity, so you're deferring some of that tax hit. Two, it's allowing you now to be invested in the company that bought you to basically have skin in the game and be a part of the culture that's trying to grow the overall value of that firm. And in some regards, it gives you, if you're listening to this and you're like, but I'm not done growing and I don't know if I want to be done and I don't know if I want to let go of my equity, this gives you the opportunity to participate with some portion there of the deal structure that allows you to have the growth that you thought you had to give up. In addition to some of these other incentives and earnouts and transitions. And so there's what you need to realize as you're listening to this is it is not just one and done. There's a structure to this that maybe checks some boxes that has prevented you from thinking about even having this conversation. There's reasons that equity piece is something you should learn about in the options of succession, because for I think a lot of people in the industry, they don't even know that exists or that's out there or that's part of the reason of doing it.
I completely agree. And one other thing I'd add on the equity side is if you're pursuing one of these transactions, I would really meet with that group's equity team and learn as much about it as you can, right? Especially if they're private equity backed, uh, do the share classes all have the same liquidity rights? Are they buying and trading at the same, buying and selling at the same multiple? Just really understand the liquidity rights around that, understand kind of what the strategy is long term. It's super important. I know at WEG we want all of our advisors to have skin in the game, as you called it, Tyson. But we also want everybody on board with what we're building in the strategy.
So there's a lot of things that might be preventing you from making this transition and thinking about the succession of your business. What's the trade-off for them, or just kind of the perspective for the listener of joining a WEG-like firm and making that transition versus just staying where they're at?
Well, I think it depends on what type of environment you're in, right? If you need, if you need to fully repaper out of your current environment, right? The firm you're joining up with does not have that custodian, or they're looking, you're in a certain side of the house, right? You see that in certain broker dealers that have custodians might have advisors on one side of the house, and you'd have to go to the other side of the house. It's going to be a big lift. Now, DocuSign has revolutionized the way that we go about business. So it's a lot better than it was, call it 10 years ago. But what I would do is I would push on the team that you're partnering up with, and I would say, can I speak with someone who's made this transition? What type of support infrastructure do you have, right? Do you have a transition support team, or is this going to fall 100% on my team? Do you have a data capture team that can help me plug paperwork and then it's my team to send it out? And so if you look at doing a full lift out, I know a question you'd sent over before, we're not seeing multiples fall in a very different range for someone that's lifting out versus just transitioning out of an RIA. We're not seeing drastically different multiples, but you definitely have to have the appetite for the full repaper, which is it's a lot of work. And I would push on any group you're looking with, do they have the infrastructure to support that? So that's the kind of the full lift outside of things. And then when you're running just a pure consent process to transition those investment management agreements from your RIA to another RIA, whether that be positive or negative, that tends to be very smooth, right? And account numbers stay the same, history ports over. It tends to be a lot easier. And so I would just make sure that if you are considering a full lift out, which we've done plenty of, and we've also added custodians along the way to avoid that, you make sure that you feel confident in your story going to your clients and saying, hey, this is a good reason for X, Y, and Z. There is some change involved, but we do believe that this is a better outcome for you and our team for X, Y, and Z.
So I'm going to take a stab at that. So if you're listening to this and the company you're looking to potentially create as a succession candidate, to the extent that they have a custodian relationship that mirrors yours, there's some simplification that can come into that. Even more so if you're a standalone RAA and your documentation allows for that transition to happen in some cases with minimal repapering to the client. Um, and because you said it, so let's rattle off what are the custodians for WAG? So somebody's listening to this and they're in that custodian, that again may be a opportunity to understand where fit may fall.
So we've got double-digit custodians, and we've added, some along the way. I had to Google when we added a custodian in Liechtenstein. I had to figure out where that even was. To be completely
And
honest,
where is it? Where is it? Help the
um,
listener.
yeah, I will let everybody. It was so fun for me. I want everybody to
Oh,
go
there you
and,
go.
and take a look. Because it was a part of the world I wasn't super familiar with. But all this to say, our primary custodian is Charles Schwab, in terms of majority of assets. But we also have big relationships with Fidelity, Raymond James, Pershing, SEI, and a couple others. But the majority of the assets are at Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Raymond James, and Pershing.
What are you hearing from advisors or from your team that tells you from advisors? I don't know how often you deal with people post transition. What are they hearing from the advisors kind of once the dust settles?
Well, I mean, the good news is we're all colleagues. And so I am connecting with advisors. One of the most, powerful things is when I can reach out to an advisor I know is having a really good experience and the team is having a good experience and saying, hey, would you mind paying it forward and doing a reference call for us? Right. Will you speak with a group that's considering joining WEG and they want to know about the good and the bad and the ugly? What I can say in terms of, when you make a transition, the difference between a successful transition and an unsuccessful one is how do you treat your client service staff, right? When you are making a change into a model like ours, where we do change the technology system into our CRM and in our instance of our portfolio accounting system, there's change, right? And that's difficult. And a lot of those folks really get their steam from helping deliver great advice, and they feel like when they're looking at a new CRM or a new portfolio accounting system, they're looking at a box of snakes. And so we've really invested and built out a team that goes on site pre and post close to help facilitate the training and make sure that everyone's as comfortable. But everyone knows change is change and it's difficult. So typically, the first 3 months after are a little bit slower. We tell folks, maybe push out a couple weeks worth of client meetings, make sure you feel really comfortable in your new environment before you start bringing clients in, and for review meetings and things like that. So typically it's kind of 90 days of transition, and then when you look kind of 6 months back, people are fully going, and that's typically when we start kind of unlocking the WEG growth that we can help with folks. I know you guys have probably had some of the custodial referral programs and other firms talk about digital marketing and enterprise relationships with centers of influence. We can unlock that. And so typically a year in, folks are growing quickly. They're feeling really good. They might have opened up another custodial relationship and they feel like they're back to doing what they want to do, which is help clients achieve great outcomes.
So now hold
We
on, because I think this was going to be missed, and I was surprised when I was interviewing and talking to one of the associates that was an advisor that made the transition at WAG and the same custodian that I was in at the time. And when I asked him what surprised you the most about the transition, his response was the number of clients that they create introductions for us for. So talk a little bit about that, because I don't think people would even think that's, most advisors are out there on their own trying to make that happen. How does that work within the culture of WAG?
Absolutely. So we're a very growth oriented firm. And and we've always have been, we've always believed that on top of generating client referrals, as an advisor, we have to have a systematic, repeatable way to grow. And so our firm was founded with a radio show. And obviously what's great about marketing and having a CEO who's a former marketer in Jeff Deco is that what works today won't work tomorrow. And so radio obviously has died down. We still have plenty of listeners to our WCCO show, but we pivoted to direct mail, to webinar and seminar, did a newspaper stint, and then ultimately pivoted to kind of big data, digital marketing, finding people who are statistically likely to have assets based on publicly available information, and then seeing how they're interacting with our content, right? So if Tyson is getting, Googling for Maseratis and Kim is Googling for will I run out of money, we have no idea how much money they might have, but they perceive themselves differently. But ultimately, right, we have a new client acquisition team that's monitoring that lead system and helping drive leads for our clients, right? Finding people online. We're involved in these referral programs that folks have heard about at Charles Schwab and Fidelity. We're a major player in both of them, where we can keep the custodial relationship, often deepen the planning expertise, and ultimately better, achieve a better outcome for that client than when working with the financial consultant. And then, have these relationships with, big institutions that are centers of influence, kind of we have solicitor arrangements with. So on top of what any advisor is doing on a day-to-day basis to generate new referrals, we can kind of supplement that with the additional growth channels of the referral programs, the digital marketing. We call it the SRP internally for the centers of influence.
Hmm, That's helpful. So, kind of thrown out a lot of information here, and I want you to be able to walk away with kind of what are some of those next steps. Like I've been kicking the can, like so. Dean, talk to me as if I was a person who's like I'm just been kind of waiting to do something. What is your advice for me? I know I need to do something, but like where's kind of that next step? Where would you suggest I start if I've been intrigued by WEG? Like what would you recommend I do?
I'd start with a conversation. I know at WEG, and I probably speak for other large RIAs that do a lot of partnerships, and that this is, it's a very, very big decision, right? With the restrictive covenants and the legal documents involved. Some people I've heard it, called it like it's like marriage without divorce, right? You got
Mm,
one chance to find the right partner. And so we take that really seriously, right? And it's not just a one time. This is people becoming colleagues, right? We're all going to be equity owners together. We're all going to be building this together. And so we take that very seriously. And so my advice would be have a conversation, right? Nobody is going to try to get you to sign a purchase agreement on an intro call. There's so much out there in terms of the space. There's lots of firms that believe fully in scale and want to integrate everything. And there are other firms that say, you're running the business perfectly here. We just want to buy a portion of the cash flow and leave you alone. Just get out there and talk with folks. Many, I know at WEG, we've got a great, robust team here of folks on our M&A team who are willing to have conversations with advisors who love their clients, believe in planning, and want to grow.
That's great. Tyson, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with today?
Yeah, it's just that there's a lot of information to gather that you might benefit from either continuing to listen to this podcast, exploring relationships with WAG, or just preparing yourself for the reality that everybody is going to turn their practice over to somebody. And the sooner you start getting yourself updated on the knowledge that you need to have to make an educated decision on what you're going to do with the life savings of these people that have trusted you and where you want to leave that legacy, is something worthy of your time. And it's something that you should be creating a plan around. So that way, when you look back, you'd have no regrets.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks again, Dean, for joining us. It was really great to spend some time with you and give you a chance to share about the great details that WEG is bringing to the industry.
Absolutely. I want to commend you both. I know while the SEC does not explicitly mandate a succession plan, it's definitely pretty clear that business continuity and transition planning are part of an RIA and an IAR's fiduciary duty. And I think
Yeah.
that by doing a podcast like this and exposing, the listeners to what's out there and probably you're helping change the world for the better and make our industry better. So thank you both, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Dean, very much. All right, we'll be back soon with more conversations like this.
These conversations are designed to support your next move, however close or far it may be. Tap subscribe and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. I've wrestled with these things myself, and that's exactly why I created something to help you do it with less stress and more direction. My book, Total Succession, is now available on Amazon. Inside, I break the process down into 5 clear steps to help you exit on your terms with confidence, full compensation, and your client's best interests at heart. You can also visit totalsuccession.com/podcast to download a free starter guide that walks you through my SPACE framework: see, prepare, act, commit, exit. Remember, you only exit your business once. Create the space to do it well. Thanks for listening. Until next time.